the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, episode 97.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. So good to have you. And today we bring on Ellen Wald, who is a consultant on geopolitics and the global energy industry, which makes her great for this show, of course. She's also a non-resident scholar at the Arabia Foundation, which is a DC-based think tank. You can also find her on Forbes and investing.com, all over the place, always does good work. And today we're talking about electric cars. Hope you enjoy the discussion I had with Ellen Wald. Well, Ellen, I know we've talked offline, but online, I wanted to bring you on and just kind of let everybody know you went to the hurricane, you're down there, you're doing well, everything came out pretty good for you guys, correct?
Yep, we went through just fine and just waiting on the township to come and pick up all of the stuff that came down.
Okay, well, good deal. I know for large portions of us in Texas, seen just south of us, and we had Harvey come through, and obviously it didn't affect me personally. We're a little bit further north, and then you had you folks in Florida, and so it's just been a kind of a rough couple months for people in hurricanes in the U.S. So we're glad to know that you guys are doing well. But let's get into it. You said we were talking about potential topics for the show, and one thing caught your eye about the Wall Street Journal and Tesla. What was that kind of caught your eye, and that'll kind of set the table for today?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. So it seems for a while that the Wall Street Journal, they love to talk about the new kind of tech companies, especially Uber and Airbnb, and Tesla in particular has always seemed to be something that gets a lot of very positive coverage in the newspaper. And very recently, it seems that they finally kind of called into question some of the more the very lofty projections and things that Tesla has been making, and finally really bringing up some of the issues that Tesla is facing now that are becoming rapidly apparent, although to many of us who I guess we could call ourselves Tesla skeptics have been kind of raising doubts about these issues for a while now.
Yeah, and if you look at their third quarter reports, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they were way off the mark. I mean, you'd really have to be, under a rock to kind of deny that there are maybe some problems with some of the projections. But if you go back and you look at it, one of the things that it appears, if we talk about energy in general, it seems like certain parts of the energy industry, they get passes with the media, and certain parts is they get a little bit more scrutiny. Now, the Wall Street Journal is considered to be more of a conservative publication, but do you think they kind of got duped here, or do you think it's a case to where maybe just Elon Musk is just such a good front man that he's able to kind of persuade people even though the numbers aren't there to back it up?
I think Elon Musk definitely has a kind of aura about him that some people are very taken with. I think that they do a good job reporting on what Elon Musk says. I've always felt like they never really questioned some of his statements, and I think that there's a lot of hype about. Particularly about electric vehicles, but Tesla in particular is like the most hyped of all. And I'd like to see for the public a much better breakdown of what's hype for stock price and what's hype for everything else, because there's the stock price hype, and then there's the kind of everything else hype. And then what's really going on with electric vehicles? It seems like today, all you have to, a car company, or in some cases now, you have a vacuum cleaner company like Dyson saying, we're going to make an electric car, and suddenly everyone in the media goes gaga for you, and you get a stock price bump. When most of the facts now are showing, and the figures are showing, that most companies lose money on every electric vehicle they produce.
So why do you think that is? Just, I've been critical of Harold Hamm, and I'm always skeptical in general when a CEO of a publicly traded company comes out and then they talk about the future of the industry, because they're wanting that stock price to stay up. If they come out and say, yeah, guess what? It's over for us for the next 6 months, whatever the case may be. The stock's obviously going to fall. So I'm curious, why do you think when it comes to electrical vehicles in particular that maybe we don't have that same critical eye? Why do you think we don't see that?
I think that there is a desire for the future to be here now. And people love the futuristic, gadgets and things like that. And they want electric vehicles to be the future. And they may very well be the future. I personally, and based on the research that I've done or my own research, don't think that the battery technology is there yet. Yes, there have been a lot of improvements in battery technology, but for me, there's still an issue of it costs too much. These are not cars for the masses. I know that Tesla like to call its Model 3 a car for the masses, but it's a $35,000 car for the most basic. And that's not a car that the majority of American families can afford, particularly when it can only go, maybe about 300 miles on a charge. And that's not something that an average family who doesn't live in a city can rely on, can use reliably, can depend on that, to take the kids to school and go to the supermarket and pick them up and take them to soccer practice and go to your meetings and commute to work and sit in traffic for half an hour because there's a pileup on the freeway. So I tend to be very skeptical about whether these things are actually for real people.
Yeah, now you mentioned that. You mentioned sitting in traffic, and I'm curious. I saw on Twitter while Harvey and Ermi were both going on, there was some discussion about using electrical vehicles in evacuation situations like this. Where the battery technology is right now, if you had you said 300-mile range, but if you had to sit in some of these very, very long lines of traffic, do they have the battery just to kind of sit there for hours on end, not moving, or is it we're still for those kind of spots you'd still need a gas or a diesel engine?
And that's a huge issue, exactly. And as I was, myself was evacuating and then returning from the hurricane, I cannot help but think, gas is an issue, and gas is like the number one. Gas and traffic are the number one things on your mind. It's, how can I avoid traffic and getting stuck, and where can I get gas? But to me, being in an electric vehicle would be an even more difficult situation, because maybe you don't need gas, but you're going to run out of charge, and you've got to charge. There are not as many charging stations as there are gasoline stations. I mean, I happen to know, like on 95 in Florida, there is one at a shopping center, in the northern part of Florida. And I actually, on our various trips, did see some electric vehicles charging at those Tesla charging stations. But it takes a good half an hour at least to fully charge up the car, and you never know, are you going to run out of battery sitting in traffic? You may run out of gas sitting in traffic, but gasoline is a lot more ubiquitous than a charge for your car. But the other issue that I see with these electric cars and particularly with batteries is, there has never been any real tests that can show that these batteries don't degrade significantly over time. And one of the things that bothers me about a lot of electric vehicle projections is that they're only for new car sales, but very few of the car sales in the United States are actually new cars. I mean, I think something like an average car's lifespan is like 11 and a half years in the United States right now. No one knows how long these car batteries are actually going to last. And I've looked into this, and I will admit I'm not an electrical engineer, and I could probably do some more research into the engineering behind batteries. But from what I understand, every time you plug in a battery powered device to charge it, the battery degrades slightly. And we all experience this with our iPhones, and there's no indication that we're not going to experience the exact same thing with electric car batteries.
Yeah, and you brought up two things there. So the first is that if you have to charge your car for 30 minutes, it would take a massive charging station to handle any kind of real traffic. If everyone's on electrical cars and they had to go charge for 30 minutes in that kind of situation, the line to charge would be a lot longer than it would be to get gas, because of the gas, you go in there, you pump it, and you get out, and you go about your business. If you're not going to the store, you're talking about maybe 5 minutes. If you're going inside, maybe 10, 15 max at the pump. Whereas if you're going to charge, you're looking at a half hour. So that would be an issue of scale right there alone, it would seem. But the other thing you talked about when you talk about the life expectancy of the cars is one of the things that kind of gets lost in this debate, as you brought up here, is that does the battery last? Well, one of the things that we know is that if you buy a car, like for me, we have a 2011 GMC's Yukon, I think what it is, Yukon XL. Well, one of the things that we need is we need a lot of those GMC Yukons so we can buy spare parts. And if there's not a lot of them, then all the spare parts go away, and then you basically, there is no reason to go buy a 2011 GMC Yukon XL because you can't fix it if it breaks. And so even, as you pointed out, the battery could deteriorate, but also if they're not made at scale, the spare parts could be an issue as well.
That is a really good point that I actually didn't think of, which is surprising given the fact that we used to have a Saab, and when we bought Saab was about to go bankrupt, and we were actually concerned. We were wondering, like, is this actually a good car to get, because will there be replacement parts, like 5-10 years down the line? And that was definitely one of the things we had to look into, and got kind of assurances from that they would continue to be able to service the car. And that is a major, major issue, particularly if you look at the fact that a lot of these car manufacturers lose money on every electric vehicle they make. At a certain point, particularly if the tax breaks for these vehicles go away, they may stop producing them, and then you're not going to be able to get the spare parts.
Yeah, and that, it sounds like an issue. You go, spare parts, not a big deal, but it really is a big deal. And actually, not to get too far outside of the battery issue here, but bigger producers like Ford and Chevy are also facing this because they are recycling their cars and making new cars a lot shorter time period than they used to. So the spare parts is not just an issue with the solar cars or the electric cars rather, but it is an issue across the automobile industry. But obviously, if you look at the electrical vehicles, there's so few of them. Now, one of the things it seems like, you mentioned the battery technology, the battery could degrade, and I think that's a great point to look at. But, it looks like it's really hard to get a good, honest answer on where battery technology is. Even for people like me and you, we don't really care. It's not like we're trying to push it one way or another. We're just curious. Where are some good starting spots for people who go, you know what, I am curious about this battery debate. What's some good resources, maybe some papers out there that you've looked at that could help the listener go and start their research process?
I'm glad you asked me that, because there is actually a really interesting article, and I gave a talk about this to some students recently, and I mentioned it as a great place to start. It is kind of technical. I'm pulling it up on my computer right now, but it comes from a website called Clean Technica. And it was an article published on May 31st, 2016 called Battery Lifetime: How Long Can Electric Vehicle Batteries Last? And it really kind of goes through all of the issues. Like, it says, here are things that shorten the life of a lithium battery, which is what they use now. And I don't want to sound like I'm like a total downer on technology, because I really do believe that people are smart, and we're going to keep inventing new technologies, and someday we will invent a battery technology that will exceed all expectations and will be so good that it will, put internal combustion engines out of existence. I just am not convinced that we're there yet. And I think that it's premature to say that we are there just because people have made predictions about the rate of adoption of electric vehicles. So I'm just not convinced that technology is here yet. I do believe, though, in the ingenuity of the of humanity, and that we will get there. But for right now, look at what shortens a lithium battery life. You've got high temperatures, overcharging or high voltage, deep discharges or low voltage, or high discharges or charge current. So those are all some actually pretty significant things that we don't think about, and they kind of unpack what each of these means and what it can do to the battery. And so basically, you want to avoid completely discharging your battery, because that's bad for battery life, but you also want to avoid overcharging it. And that's like a Goldilocks situation that you're getting yourself into. And when people use their cars, they don't always think about that. Like, they're, come home at the end of the day, they're like, oh, I want it all the way charged, so I'm just going to leave it charged all night. Well, you might be overcharging your car, and without knowing it, degrading the life of your battery. A lot of the predictions that are made are based using optimal conditions that don't actually exist in real life.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, if you look at what's going on, especially in Europe, where they're pushing to get rid of, the traditional vehicle, if you will, it seems like on some level, I'm not opposed to electric vehicles. Don't really have a dog in the hunt, but it does seem like that we are kind of being misled about where things are at, where they could be, and then what's the realistic timetable to get these batteries to where they need to be. Because I was in Zambia a few years ago and just listening to some of the battery discussion going on there, and a lot of it was over my head. It was very technical stuff, but just kind of walking away from that, you go, okay, we still have a long way to go before batteries are there, but it seems like the politicians are really trying to rush the electric vehicles into existence, and I'm just kind of afraid for some of these nations that it may actually come back to bite them. And because if you look at manufacturers, they're going to try to manufacture electric vehicles, and if they do actually hold to some of these, I think it's 2040 deadlines that we've got out there, in the end, it's actually going to hurt the common folk like me and you.
I completely agree, and I think it does do a disservice to people who can't afford it or think to themselves, I don't want to buy technology that isn't necessarily going to work as well as proven technology. I mean, there are some people who will go out there and they will buy, every new device as soon as it comes out. And then, I've always taken the perspective of, let's see how it works. But first, and maybe I'll get the second generation or the third generation. And when you have a government that's pushing adoption, then people they're trying to kind of artificially incentivize people to make these purchases. It can lead to problems. It could also lead to people, bringing technology out before it's ready, or to people kind of not having that drive to innovate. And I do think, though, that in some cases the drive to electric vehicles is actually may really be a factor of something else, like China. Everyone says China's pushing these electric vehicles, and they have the ability as basically an autocratic government to, kind of make any laws they want. And a lot of people say, well, they don't have, they want to clean up their air quality in their cities. And that is true. And I do think that electric vehicles can be beneficial for air quality. But one of the other things you have to look at is that China doesn't have a lot of its own sources of oil, and it's been importing a huge amount of oil. And they're very happy importing lots of cheap oil now. But China doesn't want to be dependent on foreign oil resources. And so the push to electric vehicles, and I see this happening in India too, is also a protectionist. It's also part of a protectionist economic policy of saying, we don't want to be dependent on your sources of oil, so we'll go to electric cars. But if they're not ready and they're not good for the population, you're going to have a lot of very unhappy people.
No, and I think we could do a whole show about the China importing oil. That's one of those stories that you'll see pop up every now and then, and I don't know if it gets reported enough, or maybe it does, but it's one of those stories. It's very fascinating when you kind of see what's going on there, and then there's all kinds of stuff, as you know, that kind of goes on outside of the borders of the U.S. It's really, really quite interesting. But look, I'm glad we got to get you back on today, and if Elon's listening, we will allow him to come on and respond to these comments if he wants to. But no, we're glad you're okay. We're glad that you made it through the hurricane safely, all your stuff safely. Go ahead and plug and promote your book and anything else before we get you out of here today.
Thank you. So my book is called Saudi Inc. is scheduled to come out in the springtime, and you can go and pre-order it now on the Amazon page. I'm sure Brian will make that available to everyone, and I would love to see those pre-orders come in. And I think we're going to be starting at some point soon a book plate offer. So if you think you might want to get a signed copy, but you may not be in an area where I'll be doing a signing, we're going to have, you can register, you can show your receipt, and I will send you a signed book plate.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to have that up soon.
Okay, great. And once you get those dates and times of your tour, let us know. We'll post it on the website for the listeners as well, because that would be great. And hey, one final thing before I let you go, I asked just a second ago, the IPO, will we see it in 2018 for Aramco?
Very exciting news. According to Khalid Al-Fali, the Aramco IPO is on track and is going to happen in the second half of 2018. So if you want to be prepared and know all about the company, you should definitely get the book before then. And since it's coming out probably in the second quarter of 2018, I think it's good timing. Okay,
great. Yeah, we will pump that book really hard so the listeners can get it and read it, because I'm excited to read it. There's so much. I have a lady that lives across the street from me, and her husband worked at Aramco for years and years and years, and so I mentioned the other day, I said, hey, I know someone writing a book about Aramco, and she was telling me about some of the times they spent there. So it's a fascinating topic apart from the IPO, but with the IPO coming up, it's really really exciting. So look forward to your book. We will definitely be promoting that on globalinterview.com, and we will link to the Amazon link, as you mentioned, in the show notes as well.
Thank you. And I love hearing stories from people who work there. So, if you did work there and you want to drop me a note on my website, I'd love to hear your story. So feel free to contact me.
Okay, great. Well, it was so good to catch up with you, and we will talk to you again soon.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.